We are less than a year away from the start of the federal Real ID program. Anyone who gets on an airplane will need either a valid U.S. passport or the Real ID. But before you brave the lines at the DMV, Dave Druker from the Illinois Secretary of State's office is here to help iron out some of the facts about the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure. Great to be with you all.
So if people are confused out there, they're not alone. A lot of folks are confused about what this is and what's going on, right?
I think that's a fair statement. We're making every effort to try to get out and to reach out to people. We strongly recommend people go to our website, realid.ilsos.gov. There's an interactive program there, and they'll be able to know exactly what documents they need to bring in when they go to the DMV. Mm-hmm. The last thing we want is people coming into the DMV waiting for a period of time and then being told you don't have the correct information.
So what's wrong with our regular IDs? What's the issue?
Well, there's nothing wrong. This is a federal government requirement. The Department of Homeland Security is requiring that by October of 2020, everybody in the United States who gets on an airplane in this country has to have a Real ID or a passport. Or a military ID, that would get you on as well. The standards for a Real ID are more, the paperwork you have to bring in than the standard driver's license. That's why we encourage people to think carefully if they really in fact do need it.
So
the fact is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so our Real IDs, essentially, they're all going to replace the current IDs, or
no,
will both be able to work at the same time?
It's an option for people. Okay. If somebody, for example, isn't flying, if they don't like to fly, if they're a senior that's not going to get on an airplane and is just using driving to get to Walgreens to pick up their prescription, they really don't need a Real ID.
Okay.
If you have a passport, you don't need a Real ID. You've got one already. Right. So that's why we want people to consider carefully, before they come to the facility and just say, oh, I want it. Think about it if they really do need it.
Well, now, so if let's say my driver's license is expired, do I go to the DMV and have a choice between the two? And is there a reason to not get the Real ID? Is it more expensive to get the Real ID?
No, they're both $30 for 4 years.
Okay, so it would make more sense just to get it.
That's not a problem. Yeah, in some sense, that does make some sense. But one advantage to the standard license is it's a shorter period of time that you're going in. You don't have to bring in the same documents that you do for the Real ID.
Okay.
We can talk a little bit about this, but again, if people go to that website, they'll be able to know exactly what documents they need. But what you would need, just as to go through that superficially, if you have a moment, what you would need would be a passport or birth certificate, one of those two. Mm-hmm. Social Security card, or a W-2 that's got the SOCH on it, and then 2 pieces of mail from a utility, or the Secretary of State or something like that. Yes. Voter registration card would count as that too.
All right, not to confuse anyone even more, but now I'm a little confused. So does a Real ID supplement a driver's license? So if you get pulled over while you're driving, do you hand your Real ID or do you hand your driver's license?
There are 2 documents. We're talking about a Real ID as a driver's license.
Okay.
And a Real ID
separate
as an identification.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So you have those two types of things.
I hope I didn't confuse everyone more, by the way.
A Real ID driver's license is allowing you to drive like the standard license does.
So is there any indication that the Secretary of State is going to move fully towards these Real IDs? Like, should we just get it to have it and get it out the way?
Again, I think what you really do need to do is to think, do I really need it?
Okay.
Again, if you have the passport, and I use myself as an example, I have a passport that's good until 2026. My driver's license expires in 2021. I'm not going to go to the facility. I'm going to use the passport, even if I'm flying from Chicago to St. Louis. On a domestic flight, I'll use the passport for that.
I always get nervous, though, about carrying my passport around when I don't need to, because if you lose that document, it's a whole nother issue trying to get it replaced than it would be to get Real ID.
That's true. It is an extra document to bring. I would strongly encourage people to think about it. It is something else you do need to be careful of if you do carry.
When you talk about the standards of getting a driver's license and the requirements versus getting a Real ID, obviously you need a little bit more. Did the feds tell you exactly what they're looking for, why they want extra documents? I mean, obviously they must be doing this in the name of air safety or travel safety.
Yeah, this whole thing goes back to really the tragedy of 9/11 and the Patriot Act when this was originally passed, and they've gone through any number of iterations of trying to implement this. One of the reasons that there's so much pressure around the DMVs around the country now is that at one point the understanding was is that the federal government would allow a second option for people who didn't have a real ID to still get on an airplane, whether it would be a round of questioning or going through another level of security. But then they changed that, so then that put all pressure on the DMVs around the country to expedite getting people through the system.
If you give me a pass to not have to take off my shoes, that'd be the best part of all. Whatever that needs.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate all
My pleasure. Thank you for the time,
information.
folks.
For more information, check out the Real ID page on the Secretary of State's website. We're also going to have all this information up on our JAM website as well.